Guys, I'm Joe Nichols, the Mountain Man, and you're watching Arkie Outdoors. All right, guys, we're in our adjacent state in Oklahoma here at the absolutely beautiful Robbers Cave State Park. We're here right now. We're fixing to do it's a cane pole demonstration and a fishing trip. So stay tuned with us.
I am one of the activities coordinators out here at Robbers Cave State Park. I've been here for about 2 years, and I'm going to be taking you fishing today, okay? So I've got all our supplies ready. We've got some pre-made poles, but I'm also going to show you how to make them. So in the future, if you ever want to make one, you can do that. There you go. And I'll just take this unmade one, so we'll make our last. But this is kind of our form of bamboo. All it is a really long, thick piece of grass. You can find them along lakes and rivers and creeks in southeastern Oklahoma. It's really easy. All you need is line, a hook, and some scissors. And if you like to use them, bobbers. They're not really required, but some people like to have them. Start from the top. So the most top part of the pole is going to be a little more brittle, so you don't want to start too high up. Just go a couple of notches down. If you'll notice, like the pole as you go down has these notches in it. So get right above one of those notches, and then you start tying the line on. You just wrap it around and twist it 5 times. Okay, at the top you've made a loop, so take the end of your line and feed it through that loop. From there, you're going to roll the line down. I like to go a little bit longer than the length of the pole, so about like that. Oh, excuse me guys, I'm gonna put that there. Snip that off. Then we get our hook, and we're gonna do the same thing we did to get the line on the pole, but we're gonna tie the line through this hook here. And there we go, we got a cane pole. Now all that's left is to get some bait on it and we can start fishing, okay guys? So my name is Lawrence Wood. I'm one of the activities coordinators out here at Robbers Cave State Park. What I do is I lead guests out on activities such as guided hikes of our hiking trails. I will take them on hay rides, and I will also lead them in activities such as the cane pole fishing. And on a lot of these activities, I like to talk about, what we have here at the park, our history, the wildlife, the geology. There's a lot of information to be known about this place. Me personally, I like the history the most. I'm a big history buff, and our history goes back plumb to the 1800s, back when the outlaws were really big. That's how this area really became famous. And then later on, we had the Civilian Conservation Corps build this as a state park and a wildlife reserve in the 30s. There's just so much to know about this place, and a lot to do if you're into the outdoors. Well, I mean, if they're eating the bait, you'll eventually get one, right?
Work hard! Yeah. Yeah, you can hold it. Hold this, please.
Boy Scout Drew. Oh. So you're having a good time.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really good.
Where are you guys from?
Amarillo.
Hey guys, we're still up here at Robbers Cave in Oklahoma. Today I've got some exciting adventure for you. We're going to do the Robbers Cave hike today, and Mr. Lawrence Woods is going to be our guide, and he's got a lot of information and a lot of history on this place. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the cave tour. My name is Lawrence. This is the cave trail we're going to be taking today. As I was telling him, we're going to make several stops along the way, and I'm going to give you all the juicy history and information about the park, the cave, all the stuff that's really cool to know. If at any point you guys have any questions, just let me know, and if you'll follow me, we will get started. So I'm going to tell the story of this area a little bit out of order. Just different areas are good to talk about different things. Here I'm going to tell you about the founder of Robbers Cave State Park. His name was Carlton Weaver. This guy, he was doing a lot back in his day. He lived in Wilburton and he ran a newspaper company. So the newspaper company is still there today. It runs under a different name than when he had it. That was one thing he did. He was a World War I veteran, and also at one point in time he was the Speaker of the Oklahoma House of Representatives. So this guy was all over the place. There's about 8,200 acres of land that Robbers Cave encompasses. All of that belonged to him. Before this became a state park, which that didn't happen until like the mid-30s, this was more back in like the 20s. Carlton Weaver was a really big supporter of the Boy Scouts. So he gave about 200 acres of land for those Boy Scouts to come make a camp with. When you guys came into the cave parking lot, you drove over that low water bridge and took that right turn up the hill, right? Well, there was a left turn after you got over that bridge that could have taken you to what we call Group Camp 2. But 100 years ago, that was the Tom Hale Boy Scout Camp. And I'm going to tell you about the cave and why it's so special. Before, I kind of want to point out on this rock here, you'll see some darker patterns in certain areas, and if you get it in the right light, it's kind of shiny. That's iron ore. It's all over the place. As we go along, you'll see more of it, but easiest way to get up into the cave, step up here, walk across, and there are steps that take you right down. Not really. It goes in about 50 feet. That's kind of close. So that period of time after the Civil War, that's when all those outlaws you've ever heard of were super big and active. The reason this area was so popular for them was, again, this was still Indian territory back then. So it was kind of hard for U.S. law enforcement to come out here and chase someone. Say if an outlaw came out to this area, it was kind of difficult for any like sheriffs or anything to come after the outlaws. So a lot of times outlaws would come into this area to hide. Now we've had a lot of different outlaws come out to this area. It was really a popular spot for them, but the two biggest named outlaws we know were out here were Jesse James and Belle Starr. Belle Starr was a really famous horse thief. That was kind of her big thing. She actually lived about 20 miles away from here, so she was really familiar with this area. But I tell you a little bit more about Belle Starr later on the tour because there's another spot that's great to talk about her. The cave here is where I get to tell you about Jesse James. Now Jesse James, I'm sure you've at least heard of his name. He was pretty much the biggest outlaw ever. He was doing stuff all over the country. Now how he got involved with us in our park is at one point in time, the gang he was running with, they were called the James Younger Gang. They went down into Mexico and stole $20,000 in gold. And today's, with inflation, I think it's close to $2 million. So he took a lot of gold. He brought all that gold up through Mexico and ended up in western Oklahoma in the Wichita Mountains. When they got up there, they ran into a blizzard, and that blizzard kind of made them stay up in those mountains for a while because they couldn't get through them. While they were there, they just decided to hide all of that gold in those mountains. So what they did was they split it up into each person's share, they hid it in different spots, and then they got this big bucket, and they carved a map into it to where each share of that gold was. They came up into eastern Oklahoma into the Ouachita Mountains, which is these mountains here, and they came up into the Robbers Cave area. Supposedly, while they were here, Jesse and his gang hid in this very cave. As you guys can see though, the cave doesn't actually go in very far. Well, something Jesse James always said, this was kind of a code that he lived by. He would never stay anywhere that didn't have a back door for him. So, as this cave sits, he probably wouldn't have stayed in it. I love this spot. So the idea was, when we got to this part, to get this really deep old man voice, I'd be like, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." Then the music would start playing and dinosaurs would be coming up through the trees. The state of Oklahoma does not have the budget for dinosaurs, unfortunately, so we couldn't do that. But we have this really beautiful scenic view, so that's something. So I told you before, the mountains that we're on right now, these are the Ouachita Mountains. But this region of the Ouachitas is called the San Bois Mountains. So back in the 1700s, I don't remember exactly when, but the French were coming out to this area to hunt. They were hunting for animal pelts like for beaver, otter, mink. While they were hunting for that, they explored this area. They were some of the first to do it. Now they named the mountains the San Bois Mountains. San Bois is a French term that translates roughly to mountains without trees. If you want an idea on about how much land we have, from here to the cell phone tower on the horizon, that's about how big Robbers Cave State Park is. You know, they told me that when I started, but there isn't a tape measure long enough to measure that, so I don't know how they got that estimate. But that's what they told me, so I've been going with it. So that's about 8,200 acres of land, if you can imagine that. Do you guys know where Whitefield, Oklahoma is? It's by Eufaula. Well, that's where Belle Starr lived. So in the time that she lived in Oklahoma, or at the time Indian Territory, she got really familiar with this area. She was well known for hiding outlaws out in her home, like they would come down and hide at her house. But if for some reason like she couldn't house them, she would tell them about this area and they'd come hide out here.
Oh, you're in time?
Yeah, I gotta go back.
Something I like to point out here are the rocks. I would say personally, I don't know a whole lot about the plants or the geology of the area. I know some, but not a whole lot. My area of expertise is history. I'm a history buff. But what little knowledge of rocks I have, I will give to you right here. So the majority of the rocks in the park are sandstone. Fingers, but the majority of this is sandstone. So if you notice these rocks specifically, they have this weird wavy pattern to them and different colors in there. They have that green mossy stuff on them. The reason for that is about 300 million years ago, this region was completely flat and underwater. So for millions of years, there was just water flowing on these rocks. Eventually, there were underground volcanoes that pushed the rocks upward, and they made the mountains that we're on now. It's just kind of crazy to think 300 million years ago, this was just water, you know, like an ocean or something. Okay, as you guys get to this point, let's kind of take a look to your right. You get that beautiful panoramic view of the trees. I mentioned before that all these rocks are sandstone. All sandstone is really tightly compact sand, so it erodes a lot faster than some other rocks. So at one point in time, all of these rocks were a part of a bigger cliff, and just over the course of history they fell off, and that's why there's rocks kind of all over the place. It's just because sandstone erodes a lot quicker. Alrighty guys, this is what we call the Stone Corral. I don't know, me personally I'm not into this, but if any of you are, if you guys are into rock climbing or rappelling, this is a really popular stop for that. A lot of times I'll see scouts over here climbing up the rocks while I'm giving a tour. It's really cool to see them doing that. I'm not brave enough to do that, I would hurt myself, but if you guys are into that sort of thing, I recommend this spot. But the Stone Corral here is where I tell you a little bit about Belle Starr. She's the other big name outlaw that was really active in this area. She was actually known as the Queen of the Outlaws. Like I mentioned before, she was well known for stealing horses and hiding other outlaws out in her home or she would recommend them to come out to this area to hide. How Belle Starr kind of began her criminal life is back during the Civil War. Her brother fought for the Confederacy. He fought for the South. Now, Belle Starr didn't really have a good relationship with any of her family, but her brother was an exception. She was really close with her brother. During the Civil War, a lot of times he would go home to Belle and bring her presents, and they would talk about the war. He would tell the stories of all the battles he had, and that went on for a while, but eventually during one of the battles he got killed. When that happened, Belle Starr kind of went off the rails a little bit. She had a couple of guns that had belonged to her brother, so she took those and she went out and she started killing Northern soldiers. She just started killing people. That's how she got started out as a criminal. Now, after the Civil War, that's when she moved into more outlaw-like things, like robbing banks and trains, horses, like I said, that was her big thing. In her life, she had 8 husbands. Pretty much every single one of them was an outlaw or a criminal. I don't guess any of them lasted very long because she kept having to get a new one. But eventually she married a Native American by the name of Sam Starr. That's where her last name comes from, is from him. He was a Native American, and when she married him, that's when she moved down into this area, and she kind of made this her base of operations. Now, she had been doing stuff in this area for a long time. She's had all sorts of activity here, but the big story we like to tell about Belle is at one point in time she ran with a gang of her own. While they were there, they stole 200 horses from the outpost. They brought all of those horses up into this area and hid them out here. Now, there was a historian that lived in Wilburton back in the 1920s. He wrote about this story, and he wrote that Belle Starr and her gang hid all 200 horses in this very spot. That's probably not possible. You could like lay the horses down and stack them, but that probably wouldn't work out too well. They probably didn't put 200 horses here, but this was probably one of the spots that they used. What they probably did was split up the horses and, you know, hid them in different areas. But after they had those horses here, they hid them out for a while and they brought them up into Fort Smith, Arkansas and sold them back to the Army. I don't know how much battery I have left. Yeah, see. If you go where that arrow is, it's going to take you down some steps, and once we get down there, there's one more really cool thing I want to show you. It's going to be really sandy going down, so just take your time and watch your step. You can use the rock walls to steady yourself as you go down. Was it worth it? Well guys, first let me say congratulations, you have completed the cave trail. You did about a 3/4 of a mile hike, so that's a pretty good workout for the day. Before we call it, there's one more thing I want to show you on this rock here. It's really faded, so it's kind of hard to see. What it is, there's a carving and it kind of looks like a T with a W on the bottom there. What that actually is 2 J's in the shape of an anchor put together. Those are the initials of Jesse James. And his gang did, but a bunch of other outlaws did it as well. When they hid out in an area, when they were going to hide somewhere, they would always mark it. So if they ever came back, they knew that they hid here at one point in time. Also, if they were to hide treasure somewhere, they would leave a marking like this to say, hey, I hid something here. A bunch of really other good trails. I don't think we're going to be doing any other.
Alright guys, this was Robbers Cave. I hope you enjoyed that. I let Mr. Lawrence Woods do all the talking on this video. He was our tour guide today. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, hit that notification bell and share it. Alright guys, I love you. I'll see you on the flip side.